Good morning, everyone. I'm Angel Cabrera. I have the privilege of serving as Georgia Tech's president, and today I'm particularly delighted to welcome you to the Georgia Tech 2023 Ivan Allen Jr. Prize for Social Courage Symposium. This year, we are proud to welcome and recognize award-winning journalist Christiane Amanpour. If you're like me, you recognize her as that trusted, empathetic, and steadfast voice who has been coming through your news feeds for decades. As a CNN's chief international anchor, she's known worldwide for her unflinching interviewing style and for putting herself at risk to give a voice to the voiceless victims of war. Today's festivities and programs started off earlier this morning with a group of very excited students who had breakfast with Christiane, and I'll tell you, we decided that program will be off the record, which was, but it was precious. We all laughed saying we should have taped this. There was just amazing insight, and I could see just the faces of our students just taking it all in. It was amazing. Right now, I'm glad you joined us for the Fire Chat moderated by CNN correspondent Tom Foreman, a Georgia Tech parent and a former Georgia Tech advisory board member. A luncheon will follow at noon, where we will officially present Christiane with the 2023 Ivan Allen Jr. Prize for Social Courage. But before we get started with this Fireside Chat, I want to extend a word of great appreciation to the Glenn family. The Ivan Allen Jr. Prize for Social Courage was established in 2010 and is supported in perpetuity through an endowment from the Wilbur and Hilda Glenn Family Foundation, and we thank them for making this possible. Georgia Tech established this prize to honor the legacy of former Atlanta Mayor Ivan Allen Jr., who bravely defied the norms of his day to advocate for desegregation. Now, there are two aspects of the unbelievable story of Ivan Allen Jr. that always have inspired me. One was the fact that he had the courage to question his own beliefs. And even later in life, he was very critical with earlier positions that he held about segregation. And he had the courage to change, which is something that today is missing from public life. And after he changed, then he was an effective leader to help a whole city and in some ways a whole nation also change and move forward. Probably one of the highlights of that process when he agreed to testify in Congress in defense of what became the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and he was the only white politician from the South who took that invitation and went up north knowing that was likely to cost whatever political ambitions he had. So the Ivan Allen Jr. Prize could not be named after a more appropriate person, and it really celebrates those who, like him, confront complex challenges that we face in our world and risk their careers, their livelihoods, and at times even their lives for the pursuit of justice or, as we will see today, the pursuit of truth. We're honored to be joined, I think, later today. I don't know if I haven't seen him here, but Mr. Ivan Allen IV, as well as maybe other members of the Allen family. And on behalf of Georgia Tech, we thank the Allen family for their ongoing engagement and support. This year's honoree is in very fine company. The Ivan Allen Prize has been awarded to former President and First Lady Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, former Senator Sam Nunn, Congressman John Lewis, for whom this student center is named, Ambassador Andrew Young, human rights activist Nancy Parrish, physician, scientist, immunologist, and former chief medical advisor to the president, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and human rights attorney Beatrice Metetua. Last year, it was presented to Georgia Tech's trailblazers, Ford C. Green, Ralph Long Jr., and Lawrence Williams, the first 3 African-American students to enroll at Tech, and also to Ron Yancey, the Institute's first African-American graduate. Before we officially start the chat, we're going to enjoy a short video commemorating the legacy of Mayor Allen and the history of the prize.
Georgia Tech established the Ivan Allen Jr. Prize for Social Courage in 2010 to honor a proud alumnus and former Atlanta mayor who took a stand and made a difference. Funded by the visionary philanthropy of the Wilbur and Hilda Glenn Family Foundation, the prize recognizes people who have risked their careers and livelihoods, and even their lives, to bravely act to bring about change. To make the world a safer place, to alleviate suffering, to advance democracy and equality, to promote human rights and human dignity. The prize honors their compassion, their refusal to quit, and their commitment not just to words but to action in the face of challenges that seemed insurmountable. Mayor Allen's leadership and his advocacy for civil rights during the 1960s endure as a model not only for the people of Atlanta and the South, but for the nation and the world. The prize that bears his name underscores Georgia Tech's mission of improving the human condition. It is a testament to the power of acting on moral principle for the betterment of our world. And it is a reminder and an inspiration that progress and service are more than just words.
Now it is my pleasure to kick off this morning's conversation by introducing our moderator, Tom Foreman, who's an Emmy Award-winning journalist himself with a career that spans more than 30 years. His passion for storytelling has taken him to every corner of the United States and more than 20 countries to report on major news events. He joined CNN in 2004 and is based at the network's Washington, D.C. bureau. As I mentioned, he's no stranger to Georgia Tech. He's the proud parent of 2 Georgia Tech alumni and has also served as a member of the Foundation Board of Trustees and the Georgia Tech Advisory Board. He's also an avid runner, and he was my coach during the COVID years into how to best place your camera for Zoom calls. Yeah, my COVID years were highly improved because of that early advice, Tom. Much appreciated. Anyway, thank you for your continuing support of Georgia Tech and for moderating today's discussion. With that, let's get started. Tom.
It's always a pleasure to be back at Georgia Tech. I love Georgia Tech. I think the Ivan Allen College, under Dean K. Husband's Feeling, is really doing extraordinary things and sort of a hidden gem here that really has to be paid attention to. And this question of courage comes to mind. I'm thinking about the LA riots, one of the most amazing stories ever, the biggest riots in this country. I was in the middle of 50 straight hours of running through the streets and covering everything, and the executive producer said to me, I want you to go to the most dangerous place you can find with one of those old shoe cell phones that last about 20 minutes. He said, we're not going to put you live on camera because you'll certainly be hurt. He said, but I want you to go there, and on this phone, we're going to take a helicopter shot of the city in the middle of all of this chaos and the fires and the shooting and everything going on, and we want you to describe what you see. I was fairly new to ABC News at the time, working with Peter Jennings and the crew. And as I'm sitting there waiting on this phone, waiting in this moment, for this moment, I hear the anchor settle in the chair, the great Sam Donaldson. And Sam says, I hear the executive producer say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a helicopter shot of the city, all this chaos, everything that's happening. And then you're going to introduce Tom Foreman, to which Sam Donaldson said, who the hell is Tom Foreman? No one says that about our guest today. Not here or in the world. Hello, Christiane. Welcome. Come on over and have a seat.
I'm going to go over there.
Either one you want. If there's an award to be had, if there's a place to go, and if there's a place where courage is needed, there's a good chance you have been there. And that's why we're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, first of all, before anything else happens here, how do you, in all your experience, define courage?
Well, Tom, I am going to start by recognizing some of my colleagues in the audience here who have been my wingmen and women, my wing women, who have really been the people who have helped me throughout some of the most difficult times and been with me either in the field like Cindy Strand or behind, the international desk sending me out there and being careful about all of our well-being, Parisa Khosravi. And I think that this endeavor is a community effort. It's not something that you just do on your own. I'd like to say it is, and that it's just me, and that everything that you see I do is all me. But it actually isn't, and actually I do, particularly at a moment like this, I feel very moved at the idea of being given an award for any kind of social courage, as opposed to just a piece or a piece of work. Because I do actually feel, and as President Cabrera said about Ivan Allen Jr., the idea of developing a moral conscience, a sense of responsibility for what you have and how you're going to use it, and the social conscience to try to make a difference and make the world a better place. Sounds very sloganish, but I actually really believe in it, and I believe that this profession is one that when we're there in mass or not, or just in a corner that's not been exposed before, we can actually make a difference. And as we sit here in the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia, and we remember all the great, great people who have, something wrong?
Sorry, your mic's going in and out.
Is it?
A little bit. You're fine.
Okay. We remember all the great people, many of them no longer with us, who set the global example, the national and the global example for peaceful resistance, civil disobedience, civil rights, human rights. I'm really moved to get an award in their name. I've interviewed quite a few of the winners, which is great because I've learned a lot from them and learned about what it takes to, evolve in a complex world, and sometimes, as Ivan Allen, to change his one's pre-held beliefs in order to move forward and to advance the cause of human rights and social and civil rights and betterment.
That's an interesting question you raised there, the idea of changing your thoughts or your beliefs. It was not so long ago that literally blocks away you were a very young person starting out at CNN.
Yeah.
With a lot of beliefs about what we would do, what this business was about, and what you would do. How have your beliefs changed in that time?
Well, see, that's also a good question. I mean, I can be a very righteous and self-righteous person.
We're supposed to ask good questions.
Well, first and foremost, that's where I started my career, at Techwood. And the new station, apparently, the new, as I've been told, the new, control room or the studio, I can't remember which one, looks out onto this campus and onto the basketball court here. So I think that's pretty incredible that all this is happening today. I am very mindful of the fact that when I joined, Ted Turner was the boss, and was the boss for a long, long time. Parisa and I went to see Ted Turner yesterday, and we were delighted to find him in fine fettle. And, as funny and as edgy and as committed to the mission and the power of what an individual can do as he ever was. And we also had a very good lunch, and we got a nice tour of the land. And, I've grown up being taught and working for, but he insists with, one of the greatest, most courageous, most moral, most game-changing, revolutionary individuals in our world. He created the media revolution of the 20th century, after which nothing has been the same. Everything else has been a copy, the 24/7 model. Obviously, social media has entered the field, and we had a big discussion about it in the breakfast meeting, which has been very bad as well as having some good. Because what it does is it feeds, and this is, again, I say this importantly, because it feeds on the negative, on conflict, on division, on polarization, on politicization, and that whole, economic model is designed for that. So while it does help to bring certain things around the world or in our neighborhood to light, tip us off to certain things, it is also incredibly dangerous. So that actually makes our job as journalists much, much more important, because, we're the people who actually walk the walk. As I was saying, and I say this often, I don't believe in armchair warriors. I don't believe in sitting in your pajamas in some study, no matter how good the camera angle is for your Zoom, or the background. I don't believe that is reporting or telling the whole truth. And I think that we are the agents of our audience. We go out and we're the eyes and the ears, and we come back with the stories, and we work for an institution, CNN, that has the good housekeeping seal of approval because we do truth and facts. So how have my thoughts changed? I think maybe I thought that this was a great adventure, which it was and has been and still is, and that we could pretty much I think that for me, what's changed is I'm less certain about things, less black and white about certain things and more black and white about other things. And I think that, and I've known this for a few years, that this is a position of incredible power, and therefore carries with it a position of incredible dedication that's one of responsibility.
You mentioned the idea of when you started and the things you were certain of and the things you were not so certain of. I feel like 20, 30 years ago, it felt like it was a little bit easier to simply report what happened and say, well, that's what happened, sort it out. I feel like the world, through social media and other things, has become very, very adept at manipulating information and creating impressions. And I want your thoughts on this, because it seems to me that makes it much harder for young journalists coming along now to say, how do I sort out the truth of this situation? And not just impose my judgment, but also not let other people manipulate me into something.
Yeah, so I think that is fundamental, because unfortunately we've gotten to an era where people will often say, well, maybe there isn't a truth. Maybe it's all fungible. Maybe it's all relative. Maybe it's all, culturally contextualized, but no, there are truths. There are absolute truths. And we grew up, thank God, the beginning of my career was in the era of when we could find the truth. And I do believe there is the truth, because I believe the truth is backed up by evidence, empirical evidence, facts, what you find on the road, in the, talking to individuals, in the places you go to cover the news. And, you can talk about genocide, or you can talk about the climate debate. And you know this because you've done a lot on the climate for CNN, and now we're very committed to it. And of course, this was one of Ted's huge, big, again, ahead of the curve missions in life, was to save the environment. As we were leaving Ted yesterday, he said to us, "Don't you forget, the power is yours." He still really believes it, and it's true. And when you look at the difference, as Parisa was saying, sometimes people say, what can one individual do? Well, actually, one individual can do a lot. Ted Turner did a lot. All the people of the civil rights movement who grew up in this city did a lot. And then they created that ripple effect. But I do think that certainly social media, because of the way the economic model is, and now AI, are giving us a much more difficult run for our money. And I'm very, very worried about AI. I'm one of those people who believes that there should be regulation. I don't believe in the sort of let it all hang out there and we'll see what rises to the top. I don't believe in that. There used to be an era of regulation in this country that was then, the FCC and all the other things that was then just sort of opened up in the name of liberty and freedom. But what did it do? It gave the liberty of the lies and the disinformation and the cutthroat, I mean, look at the trial that we've just had, well, nearly just had, right? What did that tell us? It told us very clearly that there are major players that do not mind and do it with absolute, voluntary, that is their political and their economic objective, is to lie and create disinformation in order to make money and attract eyeballs. We don't do that at CNN. People make mistakes, but we then apologize if we get something wrong. There's this thing called corrections. We have fact checkers. To be fair, they did too, but the bosses didn't listen to the fact checkers. They had a different idea. This is very, very important. This moment is very, very important. Some say they wish it had come to trial. I don't know. I'm not, good enough, but certainly it looked like the plaintiffs in this case had a case that would have won and would have reset the bar that was created in 1964 with New York Times versus Sullivan about what it took to actually, defame or libel. But what we do know is that a major organization that has tentacles not just in this country and which has become not a reporting entity, but an entity that endorses a certain politics, no matter what, by all means, it has been held accountable. $800 million worth of accountable, Will it change that behavior and will it have a salutary effect in the bigger public space? I don't know. I hope so. I would like to think that people will think twice about the economic incentive of lying and poisoning the public sphere and the public space. And especially at a time when we need so much clarity and so much important bridge building that I think journalists can be between policymakers and the people, policymakers and policy. I hope it makes a difference, but we'll see.
I want to ask you about the concept of objectivity. When I speak to young journalists, I often say to them, many people want to say, oh, well, there's no such thing as objectivity. You cannot achieve objectivity, to which I say, you can't achieve true friendship or true love or true decency, but we strive for them because the striving is where the goodness comes from. That's where justice comes from. That's where kindness comes from. That's my view of objectivity. What do you think of the idea of objectivity?
Well, first of all, I do think there is objective. My mantra has become after I would say 35 years in the field and some of those years behind a desk in the studio, holding power accountable as best I possibly can, I believe there is objectivity. What I don't believe in is neutrality, and my mantra is be truthful, not neutral, because neutral is the false belief that you can create false factual and moral equivalence even when it doesn't exist. So again, let's talk about climate. For years, we in the press have been held hostage by an other-siderism or a both-siderism, believing that that's objective. So what have we been doing for decades? We've been saying, on the one hand, there's a climate disaster that has been backed up and verified by science, and on the other hand, there are these deniers. But what we did is created an equivalence between the deniers and the science. That was wrong. So that's a lie. It's not objective. That's a lie. It's not the truth. And we need to understand what objectivity means. So I was taught what objectivity meant, obviously in my student days and in learning, and we know that it's our golden rule, right? In Bosnia, when I was reporting, along with my colleagues, the fact that a bigger, more powerful entity, a state, a country, was invading a smaller one. So this was Serbia invading Bosnia in order to carve out an ethnically pure statelet based on ideology. So this is a genocidal ideology, right? It was the first such event since World War II in Europe. Now we're seeing it played out again on a much bigger, much more consequential level in Ukraine. The aggressor is Russia, the victim is Ukraine. It's clear. So that is an objective fact. So my view is so when I was in Bosnia and I was telling these stories of the human beings who were the victims of this genocidal ideology and action by the much stronger Serbs and the Bosnian Serbs, I was accused of taking sides and losing my objectivity, actually by people inside my own network. So it was pretty dire for me. It was a moment of reckoning. And I thought,
And how old were you at this time?
I was I was in my 30s. If I started Bosnia, it was the 90s. Yeah, so I was a young journalist.
So your future in this career, or in this business,
Yes.
was not entirely assured at
No.
this point.
So exactly. So I was very, very, very nervous about it. And then I kept thinking, well, I need to figure this out. Have I lost my marbles? Am I not objective? Have I taken sides?
Well, and you're young enough at that point to wonder what the truth is.
Precisely. But I knew the truth. I could see the truth happening. I was reporting the truth. The question is how other people were talking about it, mostly because the world didn't want to intervene and didn't want to have a clear-cut story. They didn't want those facts. They wanted to tell, which they did, from the US to Europe to elsewhere, that all sides were equally guilty. This was just generations and centuries of ethnic hatred. That wasn't true. What was true was that there was an aggressor and a victim. Just like we don't equate rapist with a victim. Sorry, no. There is truth. So I figured that objectivity was giving all sides a hearing, and a fair hearing, getting to all sides of the question that you possibly could. But again, having got all that information and seeing the weight of one versus the other, then not deciding that all sides are equally guilty, drawing a false moral or factual equivalence. Because I figured, and I knew then, that that would make you an accomplice. And when you're talking about things as serious as what I'm describing, you're then accomplice to murder. You're accomplice to genocide. And I wasn't prepared, even if people were going to criticize me, I wasn't prepared to be that. So I just plowed on, basically. I didn't make a big deal about it. I just carried on. And in my opinion, myself and my colleagues from CNN and from other organizations, I believe that as late as it did come, the fact that we kept that story on the front pages of the news, and obviously all the other networks, all the American networks, everybody was there en masse. And we made it finally impossible for a democracy or a group of democratic nations to sit by and watch innocent civilians being slaughtered and not intervene. So finally, after one massacre too far, which was Srebrenica, July 11th, 1995, the West intervened. And within literally like that, the war was over. Literally like that, the war was over. So this nonsense about how they couldn't face down the Serbs. I mean, they just frightened themselves out of doing anything for 4 years. But we kept it in their face. And thank you to Tom Johnson at CNN, who was our president at the time. We didn't talk about it, but he kept it in the headlines. It was on the A block, in the A block of every news in the United States and around the world for many, except if there was a massive breaking news day that day. Bosnia was the top story all over. You remember, it was the top story for years. And it practically broke up the transatlantic alliance. In any event, then they ended the war. Bosnia's been at peace ever since. Genocide doesn't happen over there anymore. And by the way, they went into Kosovo preemptively because Slobodan Milosevic was going to try to do what he couldn't get away with in Bosnia and Kosovo. And they preemptively ended that. I believe the press had a huge role in that, and I feel very proud of that. Very proud of that. And by the same token, when we're not there, for instance, in Rwanda, 1994, we were not there in the critical mass that we should have been. There were all sorts of other distractions and other stories. In 3 months, 800 to 1 million Africans were slaughtered by people's bare hands and machetes and clubs. That's what happens when we're not there. So we have to be very clear about what our job is and what our mission is, and tell the truth.
Tell us a few stories of courage that you have seen. I often think of the fact that many years ago, Ted Koppel and I were talking, and Ted said one of the things that most has impressed him in his entire career is the ability of people to not despair in horrible circumstances. He's astonished at their ability to stand up, and I can think back to dozens of instances of people who just, normal people who have done things that I think are jaw-dropping to any of us here. Your stories must be extraordinary. Tell us a few.
Extraordinary, but you know what? Often they amount to just just getting out of bed every day and putting one foot in front of the other and getting out there and staring down the incredible violence and degradation and denial of human rights that are perpetrated on them on a daily basis. So if you go back to Bosnia, the men, women and children who went out and lined up under shelling and shooting and sniping to get their bread from whatever bread shop was open, or to get their water from whatever well they could, because the Serbs had cut off the electricity and the water. And I also remember, in the occasional, when we had electricity, when it was put on for a few hours or what, I always remember the women running to the beauty salons, because the beauty, like in everywhere you go, when there's a moment of peace and tranquility, all the business is open. The cafes, the bread shop, the salons, whatever. So these women who, had endured months and years without hair dye and hair, having their hair done, would rush out and make themselves look fantastic. And that was an act of resistance, not just personal care and grooming. It was an act of resistance in the midst of a war in which their very humanity, was being denied. Because, of course, the Serbs, their agenda was that there's no such thing as Bosnia. Again, a genocidal agenda, a genocidal thought, which is what Russia's doing to Ukraine right now. So wherever I go, whether it's in the biggest slums in Africa like Kibera, whether it's in, the most terrible famine camps like I went with Cindy in Somalia, whether it's in refugee camps, that the Syrians were filling up in Jordan and elsewhere, you see these individual acts of daily dignity which amount to courage, right? And often, and I will say this, often it's the women. It's the women, because they have to keep their families together. They have to keep civility and society together, while the guys are maybe trying to go out. Some of them have to fight, some of them have to try to earn money, some of them have to, support. But in terms of keeping the family and the dignity of that together, it's often the women. Even in Afghanistan today, where the women are under such incredible, it's just 2023, and to think that women, after 20 years of freedom and ability to just go to school, are not allowed to do that. And the dignity and the courage of those women who we know now are going back to Taliban 1.0, and who are learning on the underground network, so to speak, the underground railway and secret houses, those who can, or maybe those who sometimes might get some electricity and some internet, go on Zoom or whatever it is. The courage to keep going in those circumstances. And in Ukraine, this is a European democracy which is under medieval imperialist attack. And it's not just on the battlefield. Can you imagine a country that sends waves and waves of missiles and drones to attack basic human infrastructure, hospitals, water, electricity? It's just unbelievable. And yet these people, to this day, believe that they are going to win, whether the world helps them or not, and this is another issue that we should come to, because they believe that they're right. They see the truth, and they have been mobilized and motivated to defend everything that's important to them. To me, that's honestly, I think in the end, that's the biggest courage. To defend, to be prepared to defend, either with moral conscience or with your life, what you know to be the most important values of civilization. And in this case, it's human life, it's the idea of democracy, the idea of sovereignty, the idea of territorial integrity, and the idea of being free to be Ukrainian people. The Russians are busy saying there's no such thing as Ukraine. What? This is 2023. It just beggars belief. And we have to keep the spotlight on them, because we have to make sure that the governments in question, which have decided to defend Ukraine, keep doing it. And that this year plus of, from the United States, $75 billion worth of military help and political and humanitarian help, that it's not all for nothing. That they cannot get fatigued, that they must not leave this and let Russia not just swallow up Ukraine, but swallow up all our safety. Can you imagine?
One of the challenges of domestic news in the United States for many, many years has been, there are always voices who say Well, the American audience isn't interested. They don't understand. And then politically, and even as we hear right now about Ukraine, politically, the people who say, that's not our fight.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, fortunately, and there are a few, I call them outliers, who say that, are being not only taken to task by their own party. If you remember what Ron DeSantis said, he faced a lot of, it's just a territorial dispute. Sorry, Ron? What? This is the fundamentals of international law. Anyway, he got pushback. Good. He got pushback because he needs to be educated if he wants to be president. He needs to be educated first. And that's where we come in, right? But I have never believed that Americans don't care about foreign stories. I was saying to the group this morning, the students, that I believe that our mission as journalists, once we understand what we're doing, is actually to build that relationship between the people and the things that we're covering. So it's either some of the people who I've been talking about, or the climate, or whatever it is, to build a relationship between those stories, those things that are happening, and those who are watching, listening, seeing online, etc. So why? In order that they care, and therefore then perhaps feel moved to talk to their congresspeople, talk to their political, their elected officials. And that works. I mean, believe you me, the reason the United States and the West, Europe, went all in for Ukraine was not suddenly because they saw the light of international law. It's because of the people in all those countries, including in this country, which suddenly was moved to be outraged. It was a grassroots movement that caused the action. But, you're right, as things go on, do people get tired? Are there other issues? Yes, but it's our business to keep these kind of stories alive. And I've always believed it. If you tell these stories well, everybody will watch.
Are you surprised? You've been around for a while doing this.
40 years since I joined CNN.
That's what, Angel gave me 30 years, but it's 40
years
for me too.
30 years in the field, yeah.
Yeah, it's. Are you surprised at the way things have progressed? Because you want to believe, all of us want to believe in our lives, I think that the world is making progress, that things are getting better in whatever sense that we think better is. First of all, do you think now, compared to the world you were in as a young person here trying to start in journalism, do you think the world is better now? And if not, what is it that troubles you about it? Where do we need courage right now? So
I think yes and no. I mean, that's a little both-siderism, which I said I didn't like. But I do think that in many instances, yes, obviously the progress of technology, of everything, basically, the efforts to reduce poverty, the vaccinations around the world that have reduced disease, all of that kind of stuff. I wanted to say the tide towards democracy, but that's very much on the edge right now. On the one hand, over the last few years, all those... Can I ask you, does that surprise you? I remember several years ago hearing a Congress member, and it was only about 5 years ago or something, and I was startled to hear a Congress member say, well, democracy isn't really the point. And I just found Who was the congressman?
I was just, he was from Texas. But I was just, but I just thought at the time, well, that's an astonishing thing for an American politician to say.
Well, of course, the American politician was wrong, because the Americans have shown over the last several cycles that democracy matters. And this is a really important thing to remember. We're sitting in the state of Georgia, right, which is very red, but also which is a state that stood up for democracy and stood up for the integrity of the vote that they held back in 2020. We also know that in the just recent midterms, and even in the 2020 election, the idea of standing up for women's rights, for instance, the Supreme Court's full-scale assault on the women of this nation has not gone unpunished. People vote. And I think that's really, really, really important. And I think more than anybody expected, the hearings on January 6th that were broadcast around this country and around the world had a big impact on people. And I think people voted to save their democracy. And I think that's really important. And if you look at Israel, right? I mean, Israel is one of the most difficult stories to cover. Very difficult for political reasons. And yet, you know, the people of Israel have given us an object lesson in defending democracy. I think it's remarkable. It's remarkable. It's remarkable what they've done. I just admire them so much for risking whatever they're risking, maybe not their lives, but they're risking a lot, to go out into the street and to say, no, this is one step too far. You're not going to take away from us the fundamental pillar of democracy, which is an independent judiciary, independent from political influence and meddling. And that's amazing. Let's see how it turns out. Let's see if there is some pullback or not. It's on pause right now, but it's an amazing lesson every single day, and they're still doing it. They're still in the street. Democracy, people are defending it in Ukraine with their lives. That's incredible. But in many places, you know, places like India, places like, obviously Myanmar's a dictatorship, but from democracies to dictatorships, you have, again, the very pernicious combination of strong men, juntas, or even people masquerading as Democrats, who are clamping down on either the democracy have or the one they don't want to arise. And that is being helped by the pernicious side of social media, because in many of these places, like a Facebook equals the news. And they can manipulate it. And again, social media's economic whatever model is based on conflict, division, and I'm afraid lies.
You've mentioned the state of women in many places in the world recently. I remember, I don't know where I read it many years ago, a simple statement that said, if you want to know how advanced a nation is, how a nation is doing, simply look at how it treats women.
Of course. I mean, look, we are a fundamentally oppressed majority. I mean, we make up half the world, maybe just a little bit over a half. And fundamentally, from west to east, from north to south, women are still oppressed. Their rights are denied, their rights are abused, and in the most violent way. It's not just intellectual or political. In many countries, it's a matter of life and death, of attack, of just horrendous treatment
what is that
of
about?
Half the world's population.
To you, what is that about? Is that about economy? Is it about psychology? What makes that happen?
It's
As a father of two daughters, I ask
yes.
that.
Well, you know, it's old think. I mean, for millennia, you know, we've been in the grip of what certain groups of men have thought about how the world should run. You know, fundamentalist religion, whether it's Jewish, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Christian. What is their thing in common? Denying women's rights. You know, dictators, and it's a lot of it is around religion, and a lot of it is around a lot of it is around religion, and a lot of it is around just old-fashioned, baked-in sexism and misogyny. And it's gone. Look, even today, if you look at certain books that are written about, there was an amazing book, I'm going to forget the name of it, but it was talking about how everything from the speed of an elevator to the temperature of air conditioning to the height of I don't know what, all based around men's dimensions. I can tell you, because I had an illness a while ago, that many, many doctors still don't take women's basic diseases seriously. Basic. And then you get to, you know, Iran, you get to Afghanistan, you get to parts of Africa, you get to the United States of America, where the Supreme Court can make that kind of decision. Sorry, it's not okay. And in some countries, we can fight back democratically. And that's really, really important. In other countries, they can't. And they're just crushed. And that's a sad, sad thing. It breaks my heart to see what's happening in my own country, Iran, and what's happening in Afghanistan and many other places. But I believe the solution, for a father of daughters, I'm one of 4 girls too, it's to get women, and I talked to some of the students earlier this morning, is to get women front and center in the public space more and more, to keep fighting, to keep standing there, to keep lobbying. We know, the head of the IMF told me this, the World Bank tells me, everybody says that by any measure, a society that is governed or administered by equal numbers of men and women is a society that's healthy. Any other society is unhealthy.
We're going into the lightning round, and then we're going to take some questions from
Okay.
the audience. This is fast, quick answers.
I can't do fast, quick.
What's your favorite movie?
Oh, you see? Okay. Ask me again. Ask me another one. I'll come back to that.
Okay, what's your favorite movie?
Oh, no. Okay, The Sound of Music.
The Sound of Music.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Dogs. What kind of dog?
A boxer. I had a boxer all my life.
Oh my gosh, this is I asked this exact same question to Mike Wallace
And he said boxer?
20 years ago, and he said dogs, and I said why dogs, and he said boxers.
Oh my God, you know Mike Wallace was one of my biggest champions. He brought me onto 60 Minutes. I love Mike Wallace.
Mike was a good guy.
Love Mike Wallace.
He was
Can you believe
hilarious,
I have worked, all of this, misogyny stuff. I've worked for two of the best men in television ever, Ted Turner and Don Hewitt, with the intervention of Mike Wallace.
Yeah, Mike was quite a guy. What's your favorite meal?
Persian food.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What particular type?
Well, I like obviously the rice with the crispy bottom, and Parisa made some of that for us this weekend. And I like I like the kebab, the chicken kebab, and I like some of the stews.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather watch a comedy on TV or a drama?
It depends. I like them both.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It
Yeah.
really does depend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm very discerning. It depends on my, frame of mind when I get home and sit in front of the television. Like I love Ted Lasso. I loved White Lotus. Those are comedies, right?
Yeah.
With a little. Yep. Just to be sure. But guess what? I wouldn't watch Succession. It gave me heartburn.
Oh, really?
Yes, because it's too close for comfort. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I live that. I don't need to have it as my entertainment.
Yeah. What's your favorite sport?
Tennis.
Tennis?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes. To watch and to play, but I love basketball to watch. I don't play it.
Oh, really?
And skiing, but I'm not very good at it.
Do you have a pick for the NBA playoffs?
Michael Jordan. That's how far back I am.
A little bit. We're going to update a little bit.
Have you all seen Air? It's a great film.
Yeah.
It's really good. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
How
this
you
is-
can tell. Okay, storytelling. You're telling the story of one of the great commercial innovations and one of the greatest players ever through a shoe. The backstory of a shoe. What a great way to tell a story.
Yeah.
The other day in the New York Times, there was an amazing report about Afghanistan. Do you know what it was about? The rice cookers, and I don't mean the machines, the chefs, the people who cook rice in Kabul. I mean, it's a phenomenal story. There's a story behind every corner and under every pebble, all standing right in front of you.
What's the last book you read?
I am currently reading, I'm a little late on this book, I'm reading The Female Persuasion by Meg Wolitzer. It's very good. I interviewed her a while ago, but I failed to read the book.
Yeah.
That
And
book.
last question, then we'll get some from the audience here. If you had not done this for a living,
What else would I have
what
done?
would you do?
Well, here's the thing. I'm only doing this for a living because I failed to be a doctor.
Well, I think we're better for it.
Sometimes it's the same. It's like an emergency room, isn't it? Yeah.
Sometimes.
It is.
There are those moments.
Yeah.
You ever have one of those moments where you just thought, oh, I don't know if I should just be doing this. Maybe I shouldn't be doing
No,
this.
never.
No?
Never. I'm completely all in.
You know, the funny thing is, people would think that you have that feeling when you feel threatened. And to me, the only time I've ever thought that is when I was like stuck covering like a city council meeting. And they're talking about something like a new sewage district. And I'm like, really? This is how I'm spending my evening listening to this?
But
This
do you know
isn't
how important that is?
I know
How
it's
civil
important.
society?
I know it's important. I did a story with a guy from the sewage department. It had nothing to do with the sewage department in Denver many years ago for World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. And I somehow got on the mailing list, back when we got mail, for the sewage department from Denver. And for more than a decade, I received 2 or 3 press things every week. Well, you need to know what we're doing over on Alejandro Street. And I'm, all right.
Well, listen, there could have been an Aaron Brockovich story hiding under any one of those press releases.
Could be.
Right?
We're always wondering.
Yeah.
Do we have ways to take questions from folks here? Do we have people who have questions? I'm sure we do.
Oh, yes. Not so much speeches. Yep. Should I just give it to you?
You can. You
Yeah.
can do that too.
It's a little hard to spot you out there. I think I saw a hand over here. Okay.
See, I'm a sunny person.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I see. I see. You know, here's an interesting thing. Christiane and I don't actually know each other well at all. We've only met a couple of times, right?
Is that right?
Yeah, because reporters, by and large, aren't around each other. Not if
Speak
you're really
for yourself, Tom.
Well, no, if you're well, maybe, but no.
I have a big community.
If you're interested, I know. I mean, we know people, but when
No,
you,
it's true. Well,
but when
you're
you want
here
to
and
go,
I'm there.
Well, yeah, and when you and also when you want to go to where the story is, that often takes you away from everyone. And there are people. In fact, when I met Mike Wallace, it was really funny. He walked in the room and he said, "How do we not know each other?" And I'm like, "Because you've been there and I've been here."
Right.
So it's we've only met a few times.
Yeah, I feel like I know you.
I feel
Probably
like I
through
know you too.
television.
I feel like I know you too. We'll go have some rice with the crispy bun.
Yeah.
Where's the mic? Oh, we have a mic over here. Yeah, what do you want to know?
Well, I'd like to know many things, but the one I'd like you to tell me a little bit about. First of all, thank you for a meaningful conversation. So the word meaningful, courage, meaningful, truth, objective, and so forth, has meaning changed for people relative to understanding of truth and objectivity? And is meaning something that we search for in a fundamental way that I think you as a reporter have been demonstrating here today?
I think you've probably hit on something very, very important. If meaning is not as deep and as obvious, and now I'm talking about the stories and the events that we cover, and if we allow, most importantly, if we allow the politicians who are elected and who can actually make a difference to distance themselves from the meaning and the importance, then what happens is that stuff doesn't get fixed. To just, have a short sort of saying about that. But if we can explain the meaning and why it's important, as I said, the relationship between it and you all, and we being the interlocutors and the intermediaries, then I think that we can highlight and demonstrate the meaning, and then it's up to people to choose. But what I don't want to be able to do is allow people to get away with not knowing and not caring, And I think that for me, just as a personal reflection, I find a great amount of satisfaction in the meaning and the purpose of what I'm doing. And I think you'll find a lot of my colleagues will say the same. This is a purpose-driven life. There's no doubt about it. And I feel that I haven't wasted a single second, a single minute, a single hour. And I'm really satisfied by that. I've just, balls to the wall, as one as my fearless producer used to say. And that's what we've done, and I'm satisfied by it.
Question over here.
Yes. Many years ago, I saw you do an interview, and you talked about a 5-year-old boy named Darius.
Yes.
And I always thought about that and wondered, I think that's one of the greatest pieces of courage that doing all of your career war correspondence, you're raising this child. Tell us a little bit about your work-life balance and how that plays. And how is Darius?
Oh, how sweet of you to ask. So that would have been, nearly 20 years ago. He's 23 and is about to graduate in 3 weeks' time. So in 3 weeks' time, I'll be on a different university campus at his graduation. And I'm extremely proud of it. But what I'm most proud of is that, A, he's doing very well. I've taken him around to a few of the stories I've done, not many, but a few, that I thought that would be age appropriate and, just appropriate for him. And I do think that one of them was about refugees, war refugees. And I believe that from that moment, he was about 17-ish, just turned 17 when I took him on a school holiday, so he was very happy. He developed a sense of the world and particularly a sense of compassion. And that sense of compassion, because he sat in a refugee tent with a young boy his age, who he could see was forced, through no fault of his own, but through circumstance, to be the man of the family. The father had been killed in the war in Syria, and he was now in a Jordanian refugee camp with his mother and sister and younger brother, I think. And he was the one at 16 who was going out and about to, get the water and be the man of the family. And that had a profound impression on Darius. And I'm very proud that he took that in. And in terms of, and I think that he'll make a good way for himself in this life. I'm not concerned about him. I had my child late. I don't know what would have happened had I had a child in my 20s when I was, climbing up the professional ladder. I don't know what would have happened, because I'm not sure that I could have endured that kind of risk and danger if I'd had that kid at home at that time. But I'd pretty much reached a certain level in my career that I felt secure, in terms of, not secure, I always feel secure, but I felt that I had done it. Do you know what I mean? And that I could then turn more to my personal side. I'm not sure that I would have been able to spend weeks and months and years out in the field if I had a little baby at home. So I was a late mother, and I have a great kid, and it's been the best relationship in my life, apart from my work. The next best relationship is with my colleagues and my friends.
Who else do we have out here? I'm having a little trouble seeing back in the crowd here. I'm sure I see a question somewhere. Oh,
yep.
Yes.
Hello. So you spoke a little bit about the recent court case and with the other network and so forth, and we all have seen in the news the relationship that the hierarchy had with the, on-air reporters and so forth. And I think there is obviously, or there is a reputation, that CNN is the leftist network, so to speak, compared to the Fox News. Can you speak a little bit to the hierarchy at CNN and decision making, and what kind of direction that you may or may not get as it relates to the news and what you're reporting?
Yeah. So from my perspective, because I'm in the international field, I don't get direction, and I believe that I have shown my competence and my ability to deliver and keep delivering at a very high standard for years, that I've earned the trust and the right to be an objective, competent journalist that makes my network proud. That's what I believe. And they've never tried to interfere with any editorial direction, and I don't believe that's the case elsewhere in the network either. I would say that the networks you mentioned, I would say CNN's in the middle, tries to be in the middle of those two extremes. It's a very difficult situation, and because the world has become so polarized, not just polarized, but politicized, like everything has been politicized, that even journalists are being shoved into political corners, whether it's in the United States or in Egypt or wherever it is. You're either on one side or the other side, and that's a very dangerous place to be. But my only, mission to myself is I have to, be honest, be truthful, and I have to use my platform to make it matter. I have to try to keep speaking truth to power, and I cannot tell you how difficult that is. It's actually not easy, because it's a position you put yourself in that is you're always tense. You're always, you have to ask the right question, must use this moment that you have to get the best response that you possibly can, that's of the most use as it possibly can be. And it's a very, very difficult position, because it's very stressful to be in that position all the time, every single day. Whether it's the Iranian foreign minister or, a US official or European or Russian or whoever it might be. You have to have the knowledge. So, because I do long interviews on my show now. It's an hour-long show, and it's not just like 5 minutes or 4 minutes. So it's the knowledge. And I feel that one of the reasons why I get very good standard of guests on my program is because they recognize a certain competence that I've developed in the field before I sat behind a desk, and they know me. They've seen me in their living rooms for decades, or for years anyway. And so they trust me. They know that I'm tough, but I think they think I'm fair. And I think that's the most important thing.
One of the decided problems in our business now, you mentioned social media, it is not even what's right or what's wrong. It is that all of you are simply being flooded with so much stuff. You're not awake long enough to sort it out.
Yeah.
And then against that sea of stuff, when somebody stands up and says, well, I will tell you the truth, the problem is all the other stuff is saying it's the truth. And that's a very difficult challenge for you. I don't envy you that. I don't envy us that. But it's the battle that has to be waged because, like you, I believe there are truths in this world. And I think we don't have them. We have problems.
They're not just truths. There is that, but they're also trusted organizations who've been around for decades that have made a relationship with their viewers, listeners, et cetera, readers. It's almost like there should have been a good housekeeping seal of approval on the tried and tested and true organizations that have been doing this work forever.
As I like to say, if you went to a baseball game and at every game they allowed one person from the stand to have one at-bat, eventually one of them will hit a home run. Doesn't make him a ball player. That's how,
I don't understand that. I don't understand baseball talk.
The point is, no.
Can you make it tennis talk?
No, yes, tennis talk. Yes, tennis talk. They could let somebody out, and somebody's going to return a serve from Andy Roddick. Oh. And the point is that a lot of people who are throwing stuff out there on social media, if they get one hit, they say, see, I'm as good as Christiane Amanpour. And I'm like, no.
Do you think they do?
You had one hit. Oh yeah, they do. What are you reading?
I'm
of course
just joking.
They do. Yeah, I mean, people, and that's one of the arguments against legacy media, against big media, is to say, oh well, look, so and so with this little website.
But I've always said to this point, and it's important. I really believe now that it's on you all. When I say you all, I mean the consumers. You have to look for the places that have a history of being honest interlocutors, factual interlocutors. They exist in print, in radio, on television, online. They exist. It is your responsibility now to look for them. That's what I believe. Sorry, it's a two-way street.
If what you're watching for news isn't about every third day telling you something that you really disagree with in the world, if it's not doing that, it's probably not news. Because the world isn't as we would like it. We're always encountering things that we disagree with. If you're watching something that you call news that makes you feel good every day, yeah, I'm right, they all agree with me, that's probably not news.
Yeah, and that's the silo I said. George Orwell wrote a long time ago, and it's emblazoned. I'm going to just paraphrase, I can't remember exactly, but he said the hallmark of a free press and a democracy is the right to be told things that you may not like and may disagree with. That's very important because now many people see things or hear things or watch things that they don't like or don't agree with and want to cancel it. That does not help in the great effort to secure civil society.
Yeah. What's the question?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, and congratulations on your award. I was hoping you could speak to the women in the audience who are hoping to have a journalism career. About 6 months ago, CBC in Canada fired an on-air talent because she decided she wanted to go gray and didn't want to color her hair anymore. And of course, there was a huge backlash. Anderson Cooper is better now today than he ever was when he had dark hair.
He's never dyed his hair.
Right, he's never dyed his hair, and he's better every day, and as was Walter Cronkite. And so could you speak to the fact that men are allowed to age, but women remain ageless?
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, there's nothing to say except that it sucks and that it's wrong and that it's stupid. Because one of the things that I've discovered as I get a bit older is that, I'm just going to say this right now. I think I'm the oldest woman on CNN right now. I think I am right now. Certainly on the international CNN, and I think I am. And I'm really proud of it. And they have allowed me to continue being me as I age, which is great. If that's the case at CBC, I think it's a disgrace. I don't know whether there's anything else that caused that. I have a great respect, actually, for a lot of what Canada does. I'm not talking about this, but it's very evolved in so many aspects of public policy and life, whether it's on refugees or on all the hot button issues. Somehow Canada seems to figure it out and get it right. So I'm very, very upset if that's the case in CBC. But I think that what the world, again, is deep-rooted misogyny. What the world doesn't understand is that people who age also gain experience and wisdom, and they can then share that. Wouldn't that be good? And as I said, not just older men, but older women should be allowed to, because there's nothing that's going to happen if either all women are running the show or all men are running the show. That's not the way the world works. There has to be a healthy and balanced in every endeavor in public life. And I think that, like many societies in the world, whether it's in Africa or elsewhere, people who respect their elders, not just because of blind respect and loyalty, but because of what they bring to the table, are stronger. And so, I think it's ridiculous. I think it sucks. And I think that in England, for instance, even at the BBC, we had a problem like that. There was a group of women who I think raised a petition, or anyway, there were a number of women who said that they were fired or let go or whatever because they were aging out. And I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just so undignified and pathetic, actually. It's pathetic.
The flip side of that I've discussed, I'm sure you've had the same discussion with many, many young women in our business. Mm-hmm. Our industry has had, I don't think it's unfair to say our industry has had a tendency very often to take young women whom they consider attractive and push them way too early into positions of way too much responsibility that they're not ready for. Mm-hmm. Neither would a young man be. They're not ready for it, but it's like, well, she's going to be great on this show. And I'm like, that is not fair to her. And that's very true. I've talked to many young women in my own office, my own industry, and at other companies who are just friends and who I know through friends.
And actually, a big disservice, isn't it, Tom?
I always say to them, be careful.
Yep.
Be careful. They're dangling these extraordinary opportunities in front of you. Go get them. But boy, you're going to have your work cut out for you for the next few years, so that you don't wind up, because I will tell you this business, like every business out there, every business, they'll give people opportunities who aren't ready for them, and when it blows up on them, they will turn around and walk away from them in a heartbeat. True. Like, well, you messed up, and it's not really. Who else?
Actually, right up front if I can. Hi. As someone who's followed your work for years, it's an honor to be able to ask a question.
Thank you.
Speaking of topics like misogyny and resurgent social problems that we're seeing in the past few years, how as educators, as journalists, as professionals, can we engage in constant dialogue about topics when they're not necessarily the singular hot button issue on the cover of the New York Times bestseller?
Yeah, so I think that's an important question too, because over the past few years, we've had a sort of flood the zone method of journalism, whereby one story is pumped out to the exclusion of all other stories for maybe a week. And then boom, that's gone. And then we'll do another one. So I feel that a menu of the top stories and the top issues needs to be part of good journalism. Because again, you can get it adds, if you don't do what you're saying, in other words, keep these things in the public eye, on our platforms and in any other public sector platforms and areas, I think that you can train a public or an audience or consumers or whatever to think that, oh, this matters because we're throwing everything at it for 5 days, and then, oh, it's either solved or it doesn't matter anymore because we're going to move on to something else and throw everything at it for another 5 days. And I think that we need to have a very good balance of the important stories. But I also think it's not just all about us. We are it is true that in the information age, those of us who operate in the information space have an immense amount of power and have an immense ability to shape the public debate and how people think, because what we choose to put out there is often what people see, right? But I think also there are many, many other areas of life, whether it's, as you said, teachers or, in art and other such areas, that have an equal responsibility. It's not a one industry problem. And that's why the older I get and the more I do this, I really feel the need to knit back civil society again, and to even in the United States, you have this First Amendment thing that we don't have in the UK, and that's all well and good, and the press calls itself the Fourth Estate. So what that means is that it's one of four pillars that hold up democracy and civil society. But all the other pillars are equally important. First of all, we have to measure up to that name that we've given ourselves, the Fourth Estate. And secondly, we have to hold the executive and the legislative and the judiciary, and when the judiciary becomes over-politicized, we're in big trouble, Illiberal democracy is a very insidious thing that's creeping around.
Am I on? Hi.
There was one. Yes.
We got two questions. We got one here and we have one over there.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being here and congratulations on your award.
Thank you.
I have two questions, or two-part questions. First of all, you mentioned something about your objectivity and kind of like changing from true black and white and having some gray areas. I would like to hear more about that if it's possible. And also, as a woman in the field, I'm an educator, and it's very difficult sometimes. There are challenges, and there are some social challenges that you have to be brave and encourage,
Yes.
be courageous. What do you think that it has been one of the most difficult, tasks that you had to overcome and, get over it? And what is your advice on that? Thank you.
Let me take your second one first. Look, we're on a university campus. And and I'm not telling you this, but around campuses all across the United States, there has been a tendency towards less openness and more cancel culture, and people shying away or not wanting to hear things that they don't agree with. I think that's a shame, and I think that's a problem in terms of where else are you going to get this opportunity, and when else in your life are you going to get the opportunity to hear a whole range of things that you may or may not agree with. But at least to get your head around the fact that they exist and to figure out how you're going to deal with them, whether you agree or disagree, outside a safe space, which is your academic environment. So I do regret the fact that there's so much of that going on campus, and that I know many teachers have been censured for certain things, and certain issues have been cancelled, etc. I also obviously believe that there's an absolute need to bring out, all sorts of aspects of life and endeavor that have maybe not been talked about before and need to be raised in terms of their importance and their justice. Justice is a huge aspect of the civilization period that we're living in right now. The need for justice in every aspect, whether it's race, gender, sex, whatever it might be, is really, really important. And so a lot of effort is going into equality and justice, and that's as it should be. On the black and white issue, I think for me the way it manifests is that I wish that at certain times in my reporting on certain stories, I had been able to do more crossing the lines, so to speak. And I mean literally crossing the lines from one camp to another camp. Sometimes it was very difficult. And I think that with age, the gray manifests itself more, even in the stories. And so I wish that I had known about the gray more and be more sensitive to the gray earlier on in my career. But I think that that's a little bit of youth and age talking. Sometimes it doesn't happen until you have more experience and more time to reflect and more looking back. Like maybe Ivan Allen Jr. He had obviously had a considerable career before he realized that he needed, because of what was happening in front of his eyes to his people and to the people of this country, that he needed to think differently about his preconceived notions. So I do think it's important to do that. Have I answered your question?
Yes, there are so many events globally that deserve to be covered. To what extent can you personally decide which ones you will cover?
We all, certain of us who've been around for a long time and have a certain position, we can all put forth. And again, remember, I have a program that I'm pretty much able to do what we think is important on the news on any given day. Pretty much, I would say. But I do think, India, for instance, I would say, soon to be the most populous country in the world, we need to look very hard at the fact that it calls itself, the world's biggest democracy. Need to do a lot of, and then I think one of the issues that's been, highlighted by the illegal war of Russia into Ukraine is the fact, and this is really important, and we don't really operate in terms of looking at it. Half the world does not believe in the Ukraine/Western democratic narrative. They do not believe it. They believe Russia. They believe that because there is an information war going on, and Russia is doing massively well, aligning with China, aligning with other illiberal democracies, aligning with India and others, Iran, etc., to tell a completely different narrative. And too much of the world believes right now the Russian narrative about Ukraine and about many other things. So I think we should, I'd like to do more stories about that. I think that's really very interesting, and it's something that is fundamental and existential. If the West cannot get its narrative out about this, it may not be able to win. The information war is huge right now. So I think, things, and I also think definitely more on the climate and on the solutions, and not just on scaring the bejesus out of everybody, because I think that is part of it, but solutions are a vital part of it too. Again, I like to look as far as I can and when I can into solutions to any given issue. I think that's important at this stage in my career and in this stage of the world. I think also, for me, it's an abomination that somebody like as brilliant and with such a world, such an experience as Anthony Fauci, who I'm going to interview this week, has come to symbolize the politicization of basic medicine. It's just unbelievable. So I think those kinds of things we need to, instead of us taking sides in a war, we need to maybe do some of the backstory, talk about, because now we're seeing the UNICEF, I think it's UNICEF who just came out and said there's a huge number, millions and millions of children around the world are not getting their normal vaccines. We're not talking about COVID, we're talking about polio, mumps, measles, all of that. And disease is spreading around the world because of the hugely politicized nature of what's happening to the medical community, the vaccine community, the scientific community. And I think we have a, there's so many stories to be told that we could fill 24/7 very easily.
And we try.
Yeah.
We really appreciate all of you being here and listening. I think I can speak for both of us to say we have no careers without you, because we have listened and talked. I cannot imagine the number of people over your career that you have met and talked to, even for a moment. But people really do listen. That's one thing I will say, that the best journalists, I've always said there are only two companies in the world, the good company and the bad company. The good company is everybody who's trying to do the right thing, wherever you are, to the best of your knowledge. If you're doing that, we're all working together, no matter who signs your check. And if you're not doing that, you're part of the bad company, and we're not working together. I'm really lucky to have been in the good company of Christiane Amanpour. I hope you feel the same way.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just want to add my my word of thanks to both of you for an extraordinary conversation. One thing I may not have mentioned before is that the Ivan Allen Jr. that will go with your award is also associated with the College of Liberal Arts at Georgia Tech. And earlier with the students, we had a great conversation. The dean of the college is with us. Raise your hand. Dean K, affectionately known as Dean K. And it's a constant reminder Christiane, you nailed it this morning when that question was brought up by the students of how essential it is that for those young leaders that are coming out of Georgia Tech that are going to shape the future of technology and what technology can do, to have that broader understanding of the world. So Exactly. So thank you for bringing that up. And now just want to say that for those of you who RSVP'd for the luncheon ceremony, I'm sorry I'm not inviting all of you, but those of you who RSVP'd, we will now transition to the Georgian Ballroom at the Biltmore. And for the rest who have joined us today, my most sincere thanks for being part of this very, very special moment. Thank you all so very much.